I survived 100 days of game dev in Unity, and I won't lie, it almost broke me. I have always wanted to release a game on Steam, but there's a problem. I know literally nothing about game dev. So, to fix that, I made a list of 5 objectives that get more and more difficult, with the final objective being to release a game on Steam. Oh, and I only had 100 days to do it. Having never even touched a game engine before, my objectives were as follows. 1. Choose the game engine that'll be the cause of my suffering for the next 100 days. 2. Make it through my first tutorial and hopefully learn something. 3. Create my first game. 4. Remake an existing game, but with a twist. And 5. The final boss of this challenge. Create and release my first game on Steam. Sounds achievable, right? To begin, I needed to... The game engine you choose when you first start learning game dev will very likely be the engine that you're stuck with for the next few years, or even your entire career. So you better pick right the first time, no pressure. Realistically, you can change game engine whenever you want, but I'm gonna be real. Once I start learning a game engine, there is zero chance I'm switching to a new one. I can tolerate the suffering of learning one game engine. I can't tolerate the suffering of learning 2. 3D games are the type of games that I am interested in making, which cuts out Game Maker and Construct. Unreal Engine specializes in 3D games, so much so that people actually struggle to make 2D games using it. Because my brain cell count is in the single digits, coding has always been one of my biggest fears. As a result, I was initially seduced by Blueprints, Unreal's visual scripting language. As it turns out, however, it's somehow worse than just learning to code. That leaves Godot and Unity. Godot is free and open source, and Unity is not. I wonder which one I'll pick. And so, with my chosen engine by my side, it's time to watch my YouTube is the modern-day Library of Alexandria. I personally guarantee that any problem you have can be solved by a random guy in Mumbai with the worst microphone known to mankind. This objective is to follow a tutorial series all the way to the end, and, like a sponge, absorb the knowledge I'll need to become a professional game developer. After searching for Unity 3D Tutorial Good, I proceeded to click on the first playlist I saw. Wow! That's a lot of knowledge. The tutorial was exceptional, and very quickly I had a complete player controller with both movement and mouse. There were some issues, but I'm going to choose to ignore them. With the tutorial by my side, I make quick progress. I make some grass, and then I make some dirt, and then I make some grass. I engage in some terrain deformation, which means that making hills, for all of you non-game devs out there. And then I add some trees. Are the trees meant to be pink? I hear you ask. No. Why the fuck would the trees be pink? Idiot. It seems that even while following a YouTube tutorial, I am still completely incapable of not ruining something. A quick Google search tells me that a pink object means that I have a broken or incorrect material or shader. However, because I am a Chad game developer and not a nerd, I have no idea what this means. You know who does know? A lot of people on YouTube. And after watching a tutorial, my trees are no longer pink and I can resume my quest for knowledge. Next up, raycasts. A raycast is an invisible line that starts at a point and travels in a certain direction until it hits something and provides information about the object it hit. In this case, we use the raycast to tell us what object we're looking at. I learned the basics of NPC movement and how to use the animation controller. And now, Tutorial Island has rabbits. Tragically, Tutorial Island has no safety fences, and as a result, the rabbit population is slowly dwindling. Aside from the pink trees and rabbit extinction, things were going fairly smoothly. That was until I reached the part in the tutorial where it was time to code the inventory system. Inventory systems are a classic. To call them an important part of many games would be an understatement. They're also very difficult to code. My first attempt at coding one did so much emotional damage that I immediately shut my laptop and left for the liquor store. My second attempt wasn't much better, probably because I was drunk, but in any case, I gave up on trying to code the inventory system altogether. The tutorials were incredibly useful and had been a great starting point, But I had come to a realization. I still didn't know how to code. If I was sat at a computer with a gun at my balls, I wouldn't know how to do much else than deform terrain. And for the sake of my balls, I wanted to change that. On my final tutorial day, I set myself my biggest challenge yet. Write the code to make this box move around in a square without looking at any tutorials. This was legitimately the most difficult thing I had done so far. A task that ChatGPT can complete in 2 seconds with 5 lines of code took me 5 hours and 80 lines of code. Looking at this cube gives me PTSD. And in any case, my tutorial days were done, so it was time to move on. Had the tutorials given me the knowledge I needed? And was I ready to tackle the challenges that lay ahead? No, absolutely not. But that was irrelevant, because it was time to make my first... 30 days was the amount of time I had given myself to make my first game in Unity. A player controller, enemies, and basic progression were the 3 goals I had to complete in order to call this objective a success. Given that making a box move around in a square had taken me 5 hours, I was beginning to think that I may have made a mistake. But I knew, with a bit of determination and a little help from ChatGPT, I could make it happen. And by that I mean no determination, and ChatGPT does all the work. And after a day of ChatGPT doing my work for me, I had already assembled a fairly respectable game. But unfortunately, fate had other plans in store for me. And one tragic day, I was slightly too intoxicated to be scurrying around with yet another gin and tonic in my hand. It was on this day that I learned Unity doesn't have an autosave feature. When I arose the next day with a mild hangover, I was born anew. No more ChatGPT. I was going to game dev raw dog style. Unsurprisingly, the next 10 days was a compilation of Unity absolutely beating my ass. But little by little, I was able to cobble together one mechanic after another. Movement was first, followed by prop randomization, and then spawning new platforms. Or something. I honestly don't remember what order I added these in. After traumatizing myself by learning Blender, and then making it all better by discovering Mixamo, it was time to add some beings to abuse. Meet the gang. They do stuff, and if you want the full rundown on them, you're gonna have to watch my other video because I can't be bothered explaining it again. I deconstructed our calcium-based homies so that when you inflict violence upon them, their femur is sent flying in a random direction. This definitely did not have a negative effect on the frame rate. Movement? Check. Enemies? Check. It's time to add some progression. Here's the plan. Once you clear a room of enemies, you are rewarded with another room of enemies. And after some unspecified amount of rooms of enemies, you will spawn the shop. The shop contains purchasable cards, each of which give you an upgrade or a special ability. At least, that's what I wanted to happen. In reality, however, I spent so long trying to code a basic shop and inventory system that I used up the rest of my 30 days. It took me 2 whole days to get this card to spin around normally, and not in an epilepsy-inducing fashion. While you can purchase the cards and add them to your inventory, the only real ability they have is the ability to gaslight you into thinking they actually do something. So, progression. Well, when you spawn the shop area, you have to walk up the stairs, meaning technically, you progress vertically, and that's good enough progression for me. With that, I've achieved all 3 of my requirements, and my first game is complete. It was at this point, after the trials and tribulations of making my first game, that I began to fully comprehend how difficult and time-consuming game dev really is. And while I was proud of my first creation, I was also slowly becoming concerned that finishing an entire Steam game in 30 days might be a little less possible than I originally thought. But there was no time for concern or celebration, because it was now day 40 out of 100. And that means it's time for the 4th objective. I needed to recreate an already existing game, but with a twist. And there's one twist in game dev YouTube that's so common it might as well be a rite of passage. I made game, but it's horror. It's a classic. And because I don't have a single original thought in my head, I of course jumped on the bandwagon. Now I just need to pick a game to recreate. And because I am essentially a goblin trying to hoard as many YouTube views and subscribers as I can, I picked a game that was popping off on YouTube at the time. A game about digging a hole is a game about digging a hole. The project started with me essentially recreating Minecraft. The original game has dynamically destructible terrain, but that's hard to make and I'm lazy. Add collectible materials, some upgrades, and various suburban props. And now we have Minecraft, but much worse. However, I was about to add the genius twist that would take this game from slop to top. Meet the fella. The fella streams on Twitch and hates tobacco-flavored vapes. Wait, wrong game. The fella lives in the caverns deep underground and will stalk you as you attempt to dig for minerals. He's also a little shy, and if you gaze upon him too many times, he will end your life. With all of the pieces in play, here is the game loop that I masterfully designed. You start on the surface with a shovel and an empty inventory. Dig some holes, harvest some materials, and sell them to buy upgrades. But be warned, danger lurks around every corner. The fella stalks you through the very tunnels that you created. Dig deeper and deeper until you reach the twisted secret hiding in the bowels of the earth. Wow, I thought, what a beautiful game loop. Unfortunately for me, I was then taught a very painful lesson in player behavior when the first person I gave the game to proceeded to dig out literally every square of dirt in the entire map and immediately glitched the fella out of bounds. Some people, it seems, just want to watch the world burn. And although my spirit was broken, the game was finished and the twist was twisted, leaving me with one more objective. Although I only had 2 games under my belt, and it had been a rocky road even getting here, I was still confident that I could finish an entire Steam game in just 30 days. To do this, I would need to be selective in the type of game I was going to make. The game loop would need to be simple, and the scope would need to be contained. Shop simulator type games are usually mechanically very simple, and as a result was my first choice in genre. However, there was one massive problem. From aquatic store simulator to gun factory simulator, every possible store had already been simulated. Or so I thought. Struck by a bolt of nicotine-induced inspiration, I realized I knew the perfect product to sell. Vape Shop Simulator would be my first Steam release. Things started coming together very quickly. After stealing the code from my first 2 projects, making some models in Blender, and nearly being completely overwhelmed by gooners, I swiftly materialized a working prototype. Customers will show up and buy things. You can order unnecessary amounts of furniture, and you can even vape. I had 25 days left in the challenge, and I was convinced that victory was inevitable. Around this time, however, I began to suffer a plague of self-inflicted miseries. As it turns out, someone wrote a piece of code that caused a memory leak so bad, it immediately crashed the game. Additionally, for some reason, the longer you play the game, the further the NPC models drift from their pivot point, and the darkest demon of all, scope creep. The list of features I wanted to add grew and grew. Theft mechanics, unique interactions, a mini fridge. It was looking less and less likely that my 30-day deadline would be achieved. It was day 28, and I had just finished fixing a bug that gave customers speeds-to-ass abilities, when I had the crushing realization that not only was 30 days not enough, it was severely inadequate. Just like me. Now, some of you may be sitting there thinking, how the fuck did this man think he was going to make a Steam game in 30 days with essentially zero experience? And my response to that is Wishlist Vape Shop Simulator on Steam. That's right, it's shillin' time, baby. Does selling vapes to Zoomers for 10 hours a day sound like your kind of entertainment? Then wishlist the game using the link in the description. If the 9-to-5 wagey life doesn't sound like your cup of tea, I added a feature just for you. It's called Violence. Vape Shop Simulator really has a little something for everyone. So, did I finish the game on time? No. I wasn't even close. With the game being months away from even being close to completion, it's time to ask, what went wrong? And honestly, Nothing. While I ran into some bugs and assisted in making my own misery with bad code and scope creep, the game actually came pretty far in 30 days. The real problem was me, thinking I would be able to finish a full Steam game in just 30 days. And although I hadn't achieved my goal, I had come pretty far from where I'd started 100 days ago. I couldn't have written a single line of C# even with a gun pressed to my balls. And now I have 2 games under my belt and a Steam release on the way. But you know what they say, aim for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars.